We all know that kids, whether they have ADHD or not, can be persistent, and those with ADHD can be especially persistent. Um, and when kids are distressed, we tend to see some of that digging in, right? And what are some signs of distress? So there's physiological distress, there's crying, there's protesting, there might be hitting or running away. There's emotional distress, which can be related, but sadness and frustration, anger, sometimes hopelessness. We also can see disengagement and shutdown. So, what we're going to be talking about today is how to look underneath the behavior, because when we seeing the behavior, it's really just the tip of the iceberg that's above the water. Underneath is what we really have to try to understand and figure out. So behavior is behavior, and there are behaviors that are absolutely not okay, and there need to be clear limits around those. But there are also behaviors that are indicators of something else. And that means that we as adults have to put on our thinking caps. And this is true when actually we're dealing with kids, but it's also true for adults when we're dealing with our partners or sometimes our siblings or our parents or our friends. So, behaviors are signals, and they're trying to communicate something, often ineffectively. And underneath the behavior is usually a struggle to adapt to or to accommodate um, the demands of a given situation or a particular need, an unmet need. So people may have a need, but they're not able to communicate it effectively or clearly. So, for example, a child might say, "I need my screens." What's the need about? I need to keep my mind busy because it's distracted a lot of the time, or I don't like feeling bored. So I want my screens, which are going to help me avoid that discomfort. I'm Perhaps the need is I have a need to get what I want. Why? Because I can't tolerate the disappointment. I don't know how to manage that disappointment. I don't know how to soothe myself with that disappointment. Or perhaps I don't know what I need. I'm just in a meltdown. I'm hungry and I'm tired, and that's uncomfortable for me. The old HALT acronym, hungry, what is it? Hungry. Oh my God, how embarrassing. Is something hungry, something lonely and tired. If you know what the A is, let me know. I should know what that is, but yeah, that acronym is always important to sort of rule out. Are you hungry? Are you are you g- you know overwhelmed? Are you lonely? Are you tired? What are the things that might be underneath the iceberg? So let me a few people entered. Hi, John, also my neighbor. Hi, Ajit. Hi, Catherine. Hi, Christine. Angry, thank you. Oh my God. Christine, that's so funny that I forgot the angry part since what we're talking about today is what to do when your ADHD child won't stop. I think that's hilarious. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So, dysregulated. I think maybe I'm a little dysregulated. So that's something that we really want to, assess for first when our children are showing us that they are not able to really keep it together. So the next thing we want to think about is how to distinguish between intentional behaviors and stress responses. So is what we're seeing on purpose, or is it a neurological autopilot? Meaning a limbic system takeover, that amygdala hijack. So is it neurological or is it purposeful? Um, and it's good to understand that this differs from person to person because certain people are triggered by different things, of course. And trigger warnings differ from person to person in the midst of a high octane moment. So something that's going to trigger you may not trigger your child, and vice versa. Now, we know that stress in the body doesn't really respond very well to punishments or rewards. That's not going to soothe our system. What is going to soothe our system are calm responses to encourage and elicit settling down, which means as the adults in the situation, the onus is on us. And sometimes in relationships, if your partner's dysregulated, the onus is still on you if you're able to hold on to yourself in the presence of their dysregulation. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, again, Christine. Nice to see you. Hi, Agaliki. Thank you. Hi, Michelle. Um, Okay, so we've now talked about what happens, this idea of this iceberg, that what we're seeing is a tip, and then there's this whole under thing underneath, which we actually need to try to access and figure out because it's what's holding that tip. It's supporting that dysregulation, and we know that when we're stressed it's contagious. So there is this way in which stress is contagious. And people, if your son is distressed, you could be distressed, and we catch it very quickly, and then it escalates into something bigger. It would be great, and you've started to do this, so thank you, Stephanie. You find it difficult at times because your son is a teen and also autistic. It's hard to know what is actually purposeful. It's hard to understand what's under the tip of the iceberg, and it's hard to get a sense of what's just a neurological kind of response. So I would love it if you would start to put in the chat some situations where your child just won't stop and you're struggling. Because I'd like to spend the time today giving you assistance in these challenge areas. Hi, Michelle. It is hard to tell. There's this mix of ADHD and adolescence, and in some cases autism. Um, we can't necessarily pinpoint, oh, this is because he's a teen. Oh, this is because of the ADHD. Sometimes what we need to look at in those cases is this is the behavior, and we need to kind of access what that unmet need is underneath that's pushing this behavior to the forefront. Berenice says, what I saw today was my daughter doesn't like being interrupted, especially when counting for hide and seek at the park today. Interesting. So she doesn't like being interrupted. What do you think is going on for her when she's interrupted? I'm really curious about how it feels to her when she's interrupted. Is it something that's a dismissal? Does she feel stupid? Is it hard for her to keep track of what she was doing? And so when she's interrupted, she loses that. It's really, we want to start to ask some questions. Um, and this means that when there's stress, what we have to start with is actually curiosity, because curiosity is what's going to help us understand a little bit more about what's going on. And this starts with a pause. And that's the hardest part when there's an escalation, because this emotional contagion. And because one person's upset can spread so easily to someone else's, it's why co-regulation matters so much. Um, let's see, I have a couple of great questions here, so I'm just going to go into them. Um, Lisa, hi. My son is in third grade, and his teacher is reporting that his hyperactivity gets out of control during general instruction. So that's interesting. So what is, first of all, out of control feels like a really pejorative term. And secondly, what does that mean? That's a short, like sort of summary statement that actually doesn't mean anything to me because I need to know what the behaviors are that you're talking about. What is he actually doing in those moments? Because what he may be signaling is my brain had enough. I attended for 5 minutes. That's all I was able to do. And now I can't attend anymore. So my body is showing you that I've reached my limit. We want to pay attention to those signals and to try to unpack them, to deconstruct them. Kimberly, hi. When the 12-year-old is behind on schoolwork and refuses to do it, he won't respond to incentives or punishments. So this is a great question, Kimberly, because when your 12-year-old is behind on schoolwork and doesn't want to do it and won't respond to incentives or punishments, my question to you would be, what is the natural consequence of not doing the schoolwork and the homework? What's happening? That natural consequence could be failure. And what does that mean? What are they telling themselves about the work? The work is too hard. The work is boring. I don't know how to do the work. Um, I don't want to do it by myself. It's not fun to sit down by myself and do my homework. I may need to do my homework in school. I may need to have an accommodation where I'm doing my homework in a supported classroom in school, so I'm not doing it at home. Family work time can be helpful for these things where you sit down and you work. You're going to set that timer for how much time he thinks he can concentrate for before he needs a break. Let's say at 12, we probably could get about 10 minutes at least. No, maybe not more. And then what are you going to do for the break? I think that the narrative about not doing the homework usually is around there's too much to do. I'm never going to catch up. It feels like I'm climbing Mount Everest, so I'm just going to avoid the whole thing. And the way we deal with that kind of procrastination is to break things down. Break them down into smaller pieces so that he can do this thing in and feel like, okay, I've made a little headway. I'm reviewing proposals right now for something, and I have 125 to do by next Friday. So I was like, I got to do 10 a day. And yesterday was the first day I came home and I did 10. And it was like, oh, this isn't so bad. I'm going to do two more. So I'll get ahead of the game. Um, and what is the reward for me? The reward for me is not feeling ashamed when next Friday comes around and I haven't done my reviews. So um, that's kind of what we want to talk about with him is what actually would make a difference to make it happen. And this shifts the conversation from why can't you to what about this is hard right now. So conflict occurs when we try to attend to our needs and express them with demands or blame or refusal or aggression. So he has a need, and his need may be, I don't feel I'm overwhelmed. I don't feel like I'm competent in doing this. I'm feeling I have a need to feel distracted because this feels hopeless to me. I want to feel like I'm competent and I can't do it when I'm faced with this task. So we want to identify that need. Oh, I see so many comments. Thank you. It's great. Tina, we are having an issue with my 11-year-old son where we cannot get him to communicate to his teachers. Example, he has refused to turn in math homework he has in his folder. Totally done, even when prompted, and all the things we've tried aren't working. So this is really interesting. Do we understand why he's not communicating with his teachers? Is it embarrassing to him? Is there a way in which his homework could be sent to the teacher electronically? Could you take a picture of the homework and send it to the teacher so that he doesn't have to turn it in? He's having obviously some kind of anxiety, some sort of social anxiety about it. It might be because he's concerned the homework is incorrect and he doesn't want to hear about that or deal with that. So again, the question is, what about talking to your teacher is hard for you? And what could we do in the interim that might facilitate this process and make it easier? Berenice, she gets angry. Yeah. So she gets angry. And the question is, what is the anger about? And I'm wondering if the anger is about, I'm trying to do something that I'm excited about and you're interrupting me and then I get lost and I can't do it and I want something. I have a need. I have a need to, do this activity and do it well and I'm having fun and I don't want to stop. And so we want to try to help our children with shifting. Many kids with ADHD have trouble with that flexibility, with moving from one thing to another. And an interruption whether you have ADHD or not, is communicating that what I have to say is more important than whatever it is you have to say or you're doing. And kids get that, and it doesn't feel good to them. That doesn't mean, in cases of emergency, you can't interrupt. This is more general. Marcia, our daughter shows so much of it during chores. Things she does fine when she wants to, but if it's something she's supposed to do, it certainly looks like purposeful defiance. It very well may be. We know that, particularly for kids with ADHD, it's very hard for them to do things they're not interested in and they don't like. So, yes, you are going to see purposeful defiance. And the question is, what is the experience of that purposeful defiance for your daughter and for you? Many kids, in fact, I would go as far as to say most kids, dislike conflict in families. They don't want that conflict. And so, if it's something that she's supposed to do, but she doesn't really like doing or doesn't want to do, is it possible right now, just to get the chores accomplished, that you shake it up a little bit and maybe give her chores that she actually enjoys doing and wants to do, and you take over the things that are a little more unpleasant, or you join with her and you're a body double and you're doing them together. Monica, black and white thinking while ruling over siblings, also thinking he's the only one who has it so rough. So, a lot of times, kids with ADHD do feel like they're alone, they're isolated, and that nobody really understands how hard it is for them to live with the brains that they have. Black and white thinking is very common for kids and for adults with ADHD. It's hard to see that gray area. It gets better as we mature. Um, but one of the challenges is this sense that from what you're saying, that I'm alone here. I don't feel like that need of being seen is met, and seen and understood. And so I would wonder, when are some times when he feels seen and understood, and how can we, extrapolate from those times to other times in the family. You're not going to probably be seen and understood all the time. That's not really possible or logical or practical. But he already has a conversation in his head about how things aren't fair. And this is what I see so much with kids with ADHD, this reliance on fairness. It's got to be fair. And what fairness really means is a sense of feeling like, I'm understood. I'm equal. I'm equal to other people. My needs matter. Excuse me. Jessica says, once my 10-year-old son comes home from his dad's house, the next few days are more difficult with his behavior. How can I help him verbalize if the issue is emotion or due to different rules between homes? These are fantastic questions today, everybody. Thank you. Um, uh, it's hard to transition. As I said, that shifting flexibility is tough for kids. And for kids with ADHD, shifting gears between houses is challenging. It's challenging not only because the expectations in different homes are different, but it's challenging because the emotional attachments have changed. I was with dad. I was connecting with dad. Now I'm not with dad. Now I'm with you and I'm connecting with you, but I feel a sense of loss where dad is concerned. Um, I think being open to talking about it is obviously what you're probably doing, but he may not be able to verbalize what's going on. And it might be okay. It might be okay and even helpful just to say it can be hard to go from house to house and relationship to relationship. I get it. And if you're frustrated or you want to talk about it and you wish we weren't divorced or separated, let's have a conversation. This is interesting because what we're talking about here is this idea of connectedness and safety. One of the things that we want to move away from is, basically my way or the highway thinking, straight out authoritarianism or, you must comply, to maintaining a relationship where someone feels connected and safe enough to say, when I come to your house, mom, I love you, but I miss dad. That would be probably a really hard thing to say, but it might be actually really what's going on. So we know that health and safety options are often not negotiable, and in heated moments, our job as parents is to manage the safety of our children, and so that is a time where it might very well may be my way or the highway, and then the sort of being able to discuss that and take it apart and explain, assess it, and address it later when you're out of what is a dangerous situation makes the most sense. So the goal that we're trying to work toward is to provide statements and cues that communicate a relational safety, an openness to having some conversation, not necessarily sitting down and looking them in the eye and asking them to tell you something, because a lot of kids won't talk to you at that point that way, and particularly teens. But you're driving in the car, you're walking the dog, you're doing the dishes, in those moments, you're, in bed listening to music, or he wants to show you some funny Instagram or TikTok. Those are times when you are building the connections that will then carry over into the moments when you're struggling a little bit and you need to rely on those bonds. Okay, let's see. Lots of comments here. Recognize this. Getting out of seat, yelling, and saying room, boom, roasted. Okay, so it seems to me, Lessa, when your son is getting out of his seat and yelling, that in that moment he needs a break. And so I would want to set up with the teacher and the school to have a team meeting and set up what are the interventions, because he's showing you that he can't regulate himself. Remember that the behavior is a signal that the skills needed to regulate and manage oneself in a given situation are not there yet. Michelle. My daughter with ODD is much better at regulating now after therapy and maturity, but when she is stuck in her whirlwind of upset and indignance, she doesn't seem to take in our responses. She continues and repeats the same points and arguments. Right. So what's happening in those moments is she's in an amygdala takeover. Her limbic system, which is activated, which is where the amygdala is just running the show. And so she's just on repeat, repeat, repeat. So in those moments, I think what would be helpful is to be able to say, I hear you saying this. I've heard you say this now 4 or 5 times. I don't think we're having a successful conversation. So we're going to put it aside. We're going to set the timer and we're going to try to come back in an hour. What can you do in that time to distract yourself or make a different choice? Because we need to call a pause in the action. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. In fact, I'm going to write down here, right here. Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. That is not what I wanted to write down. So let me get it for you. Here we go. This is a free downloadable handout on getting past no. Check it out. It's on my website. Tracy, our boys are both control freaks if one isn't living up to the other. Okay, so, people try to manage their environment in a way that can help them feel more calm inside. There are plenty of people who like to have, control in their environment, which helps them feel like they're more empowered. Um, I think it would be really interesting to have, acknowledge one area for each of your sons where they don't have control, and to start to brainstorm some tools for them on how to manage in those moments. Actual, cognitive behavioral interventions with small amounts of exposure. So we're going to try this for a little bit and see what happens, and then we're going to try this other thing for a little bit and see what happens. Lessa, she says it to the other kids. Yes, it still needs, you still need to have a team meeting at school to deal with this. Michelle Ogas, yes, no response to incentives or consequences is huge. Yeah. Courtney, in large groups, 5 or more people, my son starts yelling rude words and jumping around. Giving him attention doesn't help. Um, is there anything in particular that triggers this behavior, or is it just kind of almost like a Tourette's thing? I need a little more information here. Thank you. Anastasia, my 3-year-old screaming when he is upset. I know that he is feeling like he isn't being heard, but I'm unsure how to make the situation better, especially when his screaming is a trigger for me. So 3-year-olds yell. They definitely yell when they're upset. And thank you for sharing that it's a trigger for you. It might help in those moments to put some earplugs in. Um, uh, it may help when he's not upset, to talk about him about what feels good when he's upset. That helps him start to settle down in his body. He's very young, so he may say, I want you to hold me, or I need to scream. And we want to kind of understand that his screaming is part of being 3. He's not, the brain is just not that developed in terms of regulation. So getting a sense of what actually are some soothers for him, including distraction. Distraction can be useful, like, let's breathe, doing some breathing maybe with a 3-year-old, or playing a game, or going outside, changing the environment, having a glass of water, anything that would actually interrupt the cycle. The other escalates, teen and 7 years old. I see. So one escalates, if one isn't living up to the control, the other escalates. Okay. So Tracy, I think the thing, again, I'm just going to stick with what I said earlier, that you want to identify an area for each child that's a little bit scary, that where they don't have control, and then, slowly expose them to that with a tool for how to manage that. Christine, 11-year-old girl uses ADHD as an excuse, even though she does not really know what it means to have an ADHD brain. I think in that case, like, let's do some education. There are a lot of great books about girls with ADHD, fiction books, as well as, nonfiction books that are illustrated. Um, and maybe not use the word ADHD, but really try to identify what kind of brain does she think she has: a fast brain, a dreamy brain, a foggy brain, a brain that needs a brain with a body that needs to move. Let's try to get some more specifics about that. My 11-year-old does this too. Highest pitch at the top of her lungs, and we live in an apartment. That sounds really, really difficult. I'd love to talk, maybe suggest to an 11-year-old at least, what are other ways of expressing that you're upset? Because this particular way isn't telling me what's actually going on. It's just hurting my ears, and it doesn't make me want to be with you and help you. And that's the thing that we want to remember, this idea of communicating relational connectedness, that you are attuned to them, you are with them, and you want to be able to, be there for them when they're upset. And that the kind of high-pitched screaming actually pushes you away, and it doesn't allow you to show up for her in the way that would be helpful for both of you. Courtney, when my son is calling my daughter or anyone else in general, he won't stop until that person says what? Huh? Or any other answer will not do, and my son will just get louder and break down. So, do you know why what is so important? I'm curious about that choice of word. It sounds like he's a little bit fixated on the word what, and that somehow is a signal to him that people are listening. And um, I wonder if it's possible just to sort of play with that a little bit and say what for a while, so that he can kind of get a sense that, yes, actually, I am being acknowledged and people are listening to me and paying attention to me. And then he might be able to shift to other words. It seems like that word is really important, like uh, um, kind of a soother for him. Julie, hi from France. Bonjour, bonsoir. My son is 13 this year. School results are very bad. He doesn't try to learn, and each time I try to speak with him about school, he hangs me over on phone. He lives for 1 year at 300 kilometers to play soccer. Okay. He is exhausted, big growth and zero motivation. I don't know how to find incentive to do homework. He repeats, I manage, but it's far from real and new he moves in his classroom, stands up, speaks, help. Okay, so it sounds like he's not satisfied with what he's doing at school either. He's living away from home, so he has to manage both daily life and school. It might be too much for him. I don't know if he's getting enough support there. And, is medication something that you have considered? He's trying to manage, but he's obviously not managing. And so he's showing you that he can't manage. But having you talk with him about his homework and what he needs to do for his homework is actually not, doesn't seem like it's working. And, my basic motto is do more of what works. And so if this is not working, what else can you do? How can you get him some more support at school? Virginia, good idea about the timing. A nice reminder to teach and practice breaking things down. Yes. Janice, I am now raising my fourth child with ADHD. God bless you. Before his meds in the morning, he is loud and won't stop making noise, talking, not to anyone. The doctor thinks it could be vocal tics. That very well could be true. Um, Also, that on and off switch might just be broken in his brain, and the medication kind of solders it together. Berenice, yes, shifting hyper focus. Okay, amen, Christine. Stephanie, my son is extremely literal when it comes to anything. He corrects me. He feels he should be allowed what other kids his age are allowed to do, and that is whatever he wants when he wants. Okay, well, that's just not how it works in the world. We know that's not how it works in the world. So if he's literal, then of course, you have to be very careful about what you say and how you say it. I experience this sometimes with one of my kids. They're very like, well, you're not saying exactly what you mean. Why don't you say exactly what you mean? And we can't always say exactly what we mean. Sometimes we say something and it's close to what we mean, and that has to be good enough. So he corrects you. That probably doesn't feel very good, and he probably doesn't do it very graciously. That's one piece, and that's something that you might want to talk about how we give feedback in our family and give him a phrase to use. And in terms of that, he should be allowed to do whatever he wants whenever he wants. Well, that's just not how it works. When you're, an adult, you can do whatever you want whenever you want. But right now, your job as a parent is to offer him and provide for him, you know, for his health and his safety and his education and his welfare. And so he can feel frustrated and a sense of injustice, and you can validate that. And that's important. Let's validate that. So Matthew says, good. Ginger May. Okay, my son is 14. He still struggles with the same rules and issues as he did when he was 11. Screen time, trying to find loopholes in rules, lying, and self sabotage. It gets exhausting. Is there hope? Yes. He's just maturing more slowly, Ginger May. He needs more time, and it's just practice, repetition, and eventually these things will kick in. It just is going to take more time, and it is exhausting. And I'm sure all the other parents here will echo that it can be really tiring. So I want to just say a few things on how we can promote this kind of connectedness that kids need when we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. So we want to remember to provide statements and cues that acknowledge that we see what they're showing us, we observe it, we notice it, I hear you. um, and to also acknowledge I can see that you're struggling with managing your big feelings right now, that you're angry. They can't regulate, but they want to. They just don't know how to get there. They don't, that's not developed in them yet. And the thing is, usually kids feel bad about that. There's a sense of shame. There's a sense of frustration. One of my clients was telling me yesterday that he's angry at himself because he gets distracted all the time in class. I said, "Well, do you ever feel like ashamed of this?" He said, "No, I don't feel, I'm not ashamed of it. I don't feel bad about myself. I'm just angry at myself." Angry is a good protector. That's okay. Like that's a layer between you and feeling bad. Um, he wants to do it differently. He just doesn't want to know how. He doesn't know how. So, I can't regulate shows up in so many ADHD behaviors and that most of you are putting in the comments right now. So, one thing we want to do is we want to plan for those moments. There are triggers that are predictable. What are those triggers? And in a calm moment, how can you respond in a way that isn't going to, inflame your child more, and what are some choices that your child could make that would also shift things? We also want to slow things down in these moments when things heat up, because the faster that things are rolling, the more that the limbic brain, the amygdala, is taking over and the emotional brain is running the show. And we need to get the cognitive brain, the thinking brain, that prefrontal cortex back in the driver's seat. So this means you want to practice the 4 R's. So you want to reflect what you hear them say. You want to reframe a demand into a request. Or ask them to reframe their demand into a request. You want to respond with a solution inquiry based on we, and brainstorm options. How are we going to manage this situation? Instead of, you feeling like they're putting it on you and you feeling like you have to find a solution, or you putting it on them and them feeling like they have to find a solution. It's a we, it's that collaborative piece. And then finally, you're going to redirect toward one of those choices. So you're going to reflect, reframe, respond, and redirect. Okay, so let's go back to some of these comments. There are many of them. Thank you. My son and I both have severe ADHD, and we can get into some very emotionally charged verbal debates. We never call each other names and we are respectful, but our wills are strong. We have come a long way in the past 20 years. At least don't talk over each other anymore and wait for each other's turn. Neither are in medicine. When done, I learned from his young viewpoint and he knows from my boomer viewpoint. LOL. Raising him alone was one of the most challenging things I've ever done. It's also the most rewarding because we understand each other. No one else knows him and no one else knows me as much as we know each other. I do notice that people on the autism spectrum have a very hard time dealing with us. We have relatives that are high functioning autistic and they really do not like us and avoid us. I'm sorry, that's terrible. But each one of us humans has our own place. So never feel too sad about yourself. Accept yourself. Everyone has a common challenge and usually many challenges in life. Love goes a long way. Thank you so much for sharing this. I think that's such a beautiful example of this idea of meeting your child where they are and focusing on the relationship, and that relational connectedness. It's so important. Okay, let's see. Belinda, my son is 17 and is challenging. He can't process his emotions to talk about it. to talk about it, I don't know. Safety and anger, is. Whoops, I'm having some trouble with my screen here, so I'm sorry about this. Um, Okay. Safety and anger is it. Shifted to rebellion. He has also been diagnosed on the spectrum. It is another issue. No, it's not all part of this. His brain works in different ways. I told him when he is upset, he becomes a hurricane, breaks, so he leaves cones, comes back and apologizes, but the damage is done. I've been instructed to call the police to get help. I was to understand that anger management or therapy, we can't help if you don't call, make a paper trail. So I did. My mom died. 2 weeks later, the team decided to try moving him out from me. I'm the only parent. His dad was never involved. Today, I am just his friend. His sister and his dad are his parents. He doesn't listen to me anymore. His issues turned out to be his. He refuses to listen to me. I have very little to say, and now I'm invisible. Hmm. I am so sad to read this. No family left to hold together. Mom, go be happy. Find you. LOL. 61 in friends and alone. We did not allow to be his crutch. You are raised the same. Oh, I'm so sorry. This sounds really hard, Belinda. I'm really sorry to hear that you're struggling in this way. Any thoughts about removing different foods, dairy, gluten, carbs, etc.? That's a good question, Christine. I'm not an MD. Um, I think that that's a question to talk about with an MD. I want to say something else to you, Belinda. Belinda, this is a community of people who also have struggled with raising challenging kids. I encourage you to look for other communities, both in person and online. You're not alone. Um, and I know it feels that way. Christy, my son is 5 and feels the need to whine or cry about everything, and he just keeps going no matter the consequences. He's 5. Okay, and just like the person with the 3-year-old, his brain has a long way to go in terms of development. Um, he's crying, he's letting his feelings out. He doesn't know what else to do with all these feelings. And so we might want to start to come up with some other things that could be done when with the feelings. There are also feelings cards that you can get, or a poster that has like pictures and names and words attached to it, and maybe he could point to what's going on for him if he can't articulate it. And to perhaps consider what a lot of my clients have done is to create a calm me down box. This is something, you can go to the dollar store, or you can spend more money if you want, but it's a box that you use when your kids are dysregulated. Maybe it has a special puzzle. Maybe it has, particular markers, or some special Lego, or um, whatever, that clay, or a fidget toy, something. You put these things in this box and you keep it away until it's time to calm down, and then you can pull out the box and use the things that are in the box. Some of these children are taller than adults are taller, so adults think they're more mature than they are. Absolutely. This happens all the time. You can have you can have a 16-year-old son who's 6'2". I was talking with my friend today. I said, how tall is your son? And she's tall. She's like 5'11". He's like, oh, he's 6'2". And he is on the spectrum. And so it looks like a man. She says he has all this like growth around his like beard right here, but he's still really a kid, and that's confusing for so many people. Stephanie, I've noticed my son is good at keeping this going for hours, the repetition of same issues daily. So if that's the case, Stephanie, I would sit down with him and say, look, we're seeing a repeat of this issue over and over again. What's one thing? Let's pick one of these issues that is the number one thing that really bothers you. And let's work on that one thing. And that's what I would do, so that you can feel like there's some progress in that one area. Ginger May, I think he'll get the important stuff by adulthood, and then we get a good week with the repetition, and then he backslides. We make adjustments to the rules to better accommodate, but then are unsure if this is just part of the motions. Does that make sense? Yes, it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, which is still forward progress. Yes, Christine, look for the local Chad. Thank you, Christine, for putting that up. I really appreciate that. Virginia, could you repeat the R's? ADHD, yes, the R's. Here we go. Reflect, reframe, respond, and redirect. There you go. Okay. Okay, great. So I want to before as we wrap up, I want to just say that we want to think about the idea of our expectations of our kids. Is there a gap between what you're expecting for your child and what they can actually do based on their neurodevelopmental capacity and whatever challenges they have with ADHD or autism? So because they have an expectation of themselves and you have an expectation of them, and both of those can be you know perpetuating a kind of discomfort and upset that doesn't need to be there. So it's important to really think about, what are the realistic expectations, and that people can only change one thing at a time, one thing. So as we wind up, I want you to take a minute now. And then if you're watching, close your eyes and think about what is the one thing that really sets you off that your child does? What is the one thing that really sets you off? How do you usually respond to this one thing? How would you like to respond? What outlets do you have to deal with your frustration and gather support to help you choose a different way of responding? When you open your eyes, take a minute, and if you have a pen and paper, write that down. And if you're up to it, share it in the chat as we close. I'd love to hear from you, some of your responses. Um, okay. Belinda, I'm going to something youth at risk for help. I was judged, and they call the cops. Okay. I love him. Just give him some time, Belinda. You keep loving him. Give him some time. And love him, love him, love him. They have to be encouraged. Passover and Easter blessings. Thank you, Susan. Passover and Easter blessings to all of you. Um, uh, Thank you. If anyone wants to share what's one aspect of the reactivity they would like to address, please put that up. Kimberly says, thank you. I think reflecting and pausing is going to be helpful. Wonderful. I want to encourage you. I'm just going to put in this. I want to put, oh, excuse me. What did I just do? No. Okay, I'm going to put in the downloadable again for you in the chat here. And I also want you to really, I want to encourage you to please check out my book, What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew, and my card deck, the ADHD Solution Deck, which talk a lot about this idea of pausing and reflecting in the first C, the 5 C's: self-control, compassion, collaboration, consistency, and celebration. So please check out both of those publications, and as well as videos on my Facebook page and my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy holidays to everybody who's celebrating, and we will see you next week. Thank you.